I have never in my life seen so many Amazon boxes on porches as I've seen the past week. I mean, it's everywhere. I feel like every day at my house, there's an Amazon box that shows up. Like, it is the season, isn't it? Like, how are you doing? How are the presents coming? Are you behind? Are you in front? Haven't even thought about it. Guys, that's your cue, to get with it. I was watching the other day, and there was this ad to go and get, DNA testing. Like, you can actually see where you come from. Have you ever done that? Like, you can go and take it, and they'll actually piece together, a little bit of your history. It's like, hey, give this, because everybody has everything else. Give them this. In my family, we have an Uncle Pete. I think everybody has an Uncle Pete. Anybody else have an Uncle Pete in their family? Uncle Pete in our family, he was the guy that does all of the family history. And so I can remember being a kid, as I was getting older, he handed me this green folder, and it had a lot of our family history right there, and I would look through it and read it where we came from, and I'm like, man, this is amazing. It's amazing. There's something inside of us, isn't there, that we love to know, where do we come from? Do you know your story? You spent some time with it, your background, these moments and that moment. Maybe kind of the best of the best about your family. I don't know about you guys, but I've got some pretty extraordinary people in my family. And then, do you know also the worst of the worst? I mean, I've also got people in my family who've made some bad choices. But there's something inside of us, I think, that we want to know where we come from. We want to know our story. And it's important because where you come from is the legacy that you stand on. Where I come from is the legacy that I stand on, the one that I represent. Good or bad, where I come from is a part of who I am. Good or bad, where you come from is a part of who you are. And oftentimes we find ourselves in kind of one of two places. So we think about the past of our life, of what's been given to us, our family history, and we find ourselves where we need to live into that. I need to live into that. I need to continue that. Or we find ourselves, we look back at our family history and we might say, you know what, I need to change the story up. I need to shift the legacy. I either need to live into it or I need to change it. Over the next few weeks, guys, we're moving towards Christmas. Come on, right? We got 4 Sundays, and we're going to be there, and we're preparing for that day. And what we're going to do, we're going to look at the story of Jesus, and we're going to look how the Jesus story is told through the eyes of 4 folks: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all tell the Jesus story, the gospel, according to them, and they're all just a little bit different. And the big question over each and every week that we want to put in front of you, in front of me, that we want you as you're preparing for Christmas is this. As we spend time listening to the gospel according to them, we want to ask the question of this: what's the gospel according to you? What's the Jesus story that you're telling with your life? What's the Jesus story that I'm telling with my life? What's the gospel according to you? Now, here's one of the problems that I have in my life. In my flesh, I actually think I've made my own life. In my flesh, I actually think I want to give myself credit. Sometimes we think that we're self-made, that we've built our lives on our own. And here's just the truth I want to speak to you in the midst of that. No one's life happens on an island. You and I are always the product of the story that we stand on. You and I are the product of the story that we stand on, both good and bad. And this is true within your faith life. The faith life and story that you have right now in your life, good or bad, present or not present, is the faith story that you stand on. Today we're going to look at Matthew. You got your Bibles with you, go ahead and pull those out. Matthew chapter 1, bring up your phone. And we're going to look at how does the gospel begin for Matthew. So Matthew it kind of seems weird because Matthew starts just by listing out a bunch of names. Nothing but names. Matthew starts with listing out Jesus' genealogy. And the past of Jesus is important. The past that Jesus represents is important. It's the legacy that Jesus stands on. And his legacy is important. His story is important. And so Matthew says, look, as I begin to tell you the gospel according to me, I want to start by just sharing, like, this is where Jesus came from. This is his heritage. I'm not going to read through every single name there because being from West Virginia, I'm just not super smart. And everybody, like, I can say it about it because I'm from there. You know, we don't have a ton of branches on the family tree up there. And so, I'll mispronounce a ton of names, all right? So here's how it starts. So verse 1, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And then it starts, right? Like Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob. I mean, giants of the faith. By giants, I mean, these were people who were willing to say, God, I think that's you. I'm going to believe that that's you talking to me, and I'm actually going to do what you say. Like, that's how you become a giant in the faith, is you just say, God, like, that's what you're saying. This is what I'm going to do. So in Genesis chapter 12, God says, Abram, like, I want you to leave everything you know, and I want you to go into the unknown. Now think about that for a minute. Like, when have any of us left anything for Jesus? Forget everything, anything. I want you to leave everything that you know and go into the unknown, and I'll do this. I'll bless you. I'll bless you. I'll bless the people around you. I'll bless the families of the world through you. And Abram actually does it. Like, it's extraordinary. We have Jacob. Jacob, his name means deceiver. And Jacob comes out of the womb hanging on to Esau's ankle, the deceiver, the heel grabber. And Jacob, along with his mama, actually conspires against his dad, Isaac, who's old and can't see and everything else, to steal Esau's birthright. Steals it. Takes it from him. And then later on, Jacob is the one who wrestles with God and overcomes. And God says, now I'm going to change your name. No longer are you Jacob the deceiver, but now you're Israel, one who wrestled with God and overcomes. And a whole nation's named after him. We get down through there, and there in verse 5, we have Ruth. We spent some time with Ruth a couple of weeks ago. Ruth is an immigrant. Ruth is not an Israelite, but yet she's part of Jesus' genealogy. We have David, who is just as is described as someone who's after God's heart, who's this amazing leader, but also has one of the most heartbreaking moments probably in all of Scripture of such an impactful moral failure, where he has Uriah killed so he can be with his wife Bathsheba. And out of that comes Solomon. I mean, it's awful. Hold on, I'm going to cough. But this is Jesus' story. And we get down to verse 17. So all the generations from Abraham to David were 14. From David to the deportation to Babylon, 14. And from the deportation to Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. Matthew wants us to know that the gospel according to him is this: Jesus' past is important. The good, the bad, the pretty, the ugly. Matthew says, according to me, I want you to know right from the jump that his past is important. And in his family tree, we see these amazing moments of faith. We also see some amazing, heartbreaking moments of unfaithfulness. In Jesus' past, we see the story of God's promise being fulfilled. Like as we look at Jesus' past, it's as if Matthew wants to say, I just want you to know right from the jump, as you know the story, that in the midst of all of this that's been going on in Jesus' family life, that God has been steady, that God has been faithful, that God has been unwavering, that God hasn't moved. In the midst of all the stuff going on in Jesus' family, when there were so many reasons that God could have said, nope, I'm done, nope, not going to do that anymore, that God remained steady. He remained faithful. He remained committed to his promises. God never wavered. So just side note, like in your life, whatever you have in your past, like anybody got a perfect past? No matter how imperfect your past is. And some of I don't know exactly who, but some of your imperfections are a little more imperfect maybe than others. Like if you're like me, like I've got some deep imperfections in my past. And like, again, just side note, your imperfection does not cause God to waver from his faithfulness in your life. He's steady. Steady Freddy, all right? He's steady, unwavering in your life. In Jesus' past, we see God's pursuit where he chooses to partner with Israel. Like he calls people out and he partners with them to continue to do his will, but God is never dependent on them, okay? Like God chooses you and I to partner with him to be about his will within the world around us until Jesus comes in final and ultimate victory, of which then all of us will feast at his heavenly table forever. But until then, he chooses to partner with us to fulfill his will. However, God is never dependent on us. He's never dependent on us. In Jesus' past, here's what we see right there in the whole, Matthew would say this, look guys, here are the links in the chain. If you want to know the links in the chain from where we get to where humanity was created in the image of God, to live in communion with God, to represent God, to rule and reign on God's behalf, but I'm not going to make you do that. And then we get to Genesis 3. It only took 2 chapters. We get to Genesis 3, and we chose to live our own way. And sin and death comes into the world. And that is not God's idea. Sin and death were never God's idea. You've heard me say it before. It's not like day 5 of creation, and God made death, and he was happy about it. Like, let's say that. Or like on day 4, God made sin, and he rejoiced. No, he doesn't say, like, we chose to live our own way and sin and death comes into the world. And then it starts this great rescue mission of God's pursuit of his people, God's pursuit of you and God's pursuit of me. And Matthew is saying, here are the links in the chain. All that Jesus does is because of who he is. And Jesus is who he is because of the legacy that he comes from. All Jesus does is because of who he is. And Jesus is who he is because of the legacy that he comes from. As we start to prepare for Christmas, we want to begin today looking at our past to help inform how we move forward. So today we're going to start with looking at our past to help inform how we move forward, okay? All right, I want you to if you got your phone, get a little note out. If you're taking notes, you can write this stuff down. Just want to walk you through some of this stuff here this morning. So what's your faith legacy? Just a couple of questions we're going to dive into them. What's your faith legacy? What's your Jesus family tree? Okay, what's your Jesus family tree? What's the story that you stand on, both good and bad? Or do you have a Jesus heritage in your life where it's a legacy that you need to continue to live into, or it's a legacy you need to start representing better? Or when you think about the Jesus story of your life, is it not really existent if you look back in your life? And maybe you need to be the one that changes the legacy. Just take a moment and think about this. How have those in your biological family impacted your Jesus story? Just think, your biological family, how have they impacted your Jesus story? Do you need to live in to what they gave you? Or do you need to change directions? I think about my biological family and my Jesus story within that. My grandfather was my mom's dad, was pinned down in a rice field in the Korean War for a couple of days, had been shot in the neck, and his story goes about like this: Jesus, if you'll get me out of here, I'll serve you for the rest of my life. He was rescued and immediately started taking the steps to become a pastor. And growing up, he was like the weird one that, like in Pizza Hut, it'd be time to eat and pray, and he'd literally get out of his chair and get down on a knee and pray. I'm like, bro, I don't want to go to Pizza Hut with you. But he was also this one that you just, like, he actually believed like Jesus was Lord. Like moments when he would preach and talk about his faith, like you could just tell like he was sold out, believed it, and even was preaching a revival for my dad. I don't know if a revival's like, there used to be this little thing where they'll do like extra church during the week, and the extra church is supposed to get you extra committed or something like that. Like, I'm not saying it's bad. I don't know how much it works. Well, okay, this is bad. Let's just not go there. But one revival, I remember like being a kid and giving my life to Jesus that night. And Papaw, he was the one that was preaching. But he's also the same guy that after 43 years of marriage cheated on my grandma. And, you know, when you're 16 and you kind of feel like the Lord wants you to be a leader in his church, but your grandma comes and lives with you because her husband, who's a pastor, cheated on her, it makes you not want to be a part of the church. I tell you that, just say this, like, what's your Jesus story when it comes to your biological family? Like, what do you stand on? What's the good stuff? Like, as a kid, I'm not projecting on you, I'm just sharing mine with you a little bit. As a kid, like, I can't remember a moment ever that my mom and dad were not committed to the Lord and wanted nothing but to me and my brother and sister to be followers of Jesus and to live out God's call in our life. Like, such a blessing. But there are also some other parts of it, like the one with my grandpa. Like, with you, what's the Jesus story, your biological family, that you stand on? Here's what honor is, okay? Because like, honor your father, and honor's this. Wherever you have people from your past who you would look and say, man, they're doing that right, you should do the exact same thing. You should imitate that. And wherever you have folks in your past that you're like, I don't think that one was right, you recalibrate and don't do that. You don't honor them by making the same mistake. You honor them from recalibrating. Just take a moment. Think about those who are outside of your biological family who've impacted your Jesus story. Who are those outside of your biological family that's impacted your Jesus story? If it was the gospel according to you, what would be that genealogy of those outside of your family? I'll never forget Larry Marshall. So my dad went to this little old country church in West Virginia, little coal mining community. And one of the guys was driving around the church or around the town and would say, well, hey, well, so-and-so lives right here and so-and-so lives right there. And he got this one house that an atheist lives right over there. And my dad said, man, I want to meet him. He said, you will. He comes to your church every Sunday. And that was Larry. About a year in, Larry came over to the house. It was late on I think it was a Sunday night. That's the way my dad tells the story. And he came to the house and, he said, preacher. By the way, don't ever call me that. He said, preacher's at the door, and he's just a mess. And he said, we need to go to the church right now. We live behind the church. And right then and there, Larry gave his life to Jesus and has walked faithfully with him ever since. About maybe 8 years after that, Larry's oldest son was killed in a car wreck. He was the fastest white boy I'd ever seen. Like, he played running back, and he was so fun to watch. But they lost Alan, their oldest son. And growing up, and my kids, even now, at times will still wear 42, and mom and dad will take a picture and send it to Larry. Like, I'll never forget Brian Smith. Brian I was maybe 8, 9, 10 years old. He was the first high school guy I had ever seen who wasn't embarrassed to be a follower of Jesus. You know how most high school kids are, right? I'll just never forget that. I'll never forget Steve was the first man that I had been around that had made millions of dollars and love Jesus faithfully. Like until then, I didn't know you could be rich and love Jesus. Like for you, as you think about the people outside of your biological family, who are those people that shape your Jesus story? Your Jesus story. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about your life, your Jesus. What have been your big God moments? What have been your big God moments in your life? And who was there? Who was there? Just write those down right now. Just think about them and just jot down when it comes to your God life, who were the people that were there? Those people are a part of your legacy. They're a part of your Jesus story. They're a part of the gospel according to you. Like if you were going to write your gospel through the lens of Matthew's, those are the people that you'd start with. And you'd list those out. Those are the folks that God has used to shape your life. And here's what I want you to do. This week, I want you to contact them. Like I want you to contact them. It might be a phone call, it might be a text message, it might be an email. But I want you to contact them and I want you to say, hey, Larry, what you did, blah, 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 but you'll actually write it out. It impacted my Jesus story. You were a part of building the foundation of faith in my life. I want you to write it down. I want you to send that to them. Whether it's text, email, phone call, whatever that may be. Whatever that may be. Now, I say all that to get to what's been wrecking me this whole week. If other people do that same exercise, like if everybody had to do that same exercise, how many people would put you on their list? Like everybody had to do it. Nobody was allowed not to. How many people would put you on their list? Like who in your biological family do you need to impact? Who's outside of your biological, like who's in your life right now that you need to impact? Like this week I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, do my children really know the story? Like, do they know it? Am I faithful? Are Amanda and I committed to making sure they know the heritage, the faith family that they stand on? Do they know that? Like, who's outside of that I'm spiritually responsible for? A few weeks ago, God just put someone on my heart, and I reached out to him, and I just said, hey, man, I just feel like I miss you, and I feel like we just don't need to, like the whole church thing is so weird anyways. Like, I just love you, and I'm committed to you, and I feel some sense of spiritual responsibility over you, and let's figure out, like if you feel the same way, let's just figure out how we have some sort of orbit interaction together that I can make sure you're okay. He's like, yes, absolutely. Like, who are you responsible for? Who are you impacting? So today, as we get ready to close, I'd love you just to do a couple of things here that I think will help you to say, hey, guys, what you're saying to me is what I'm going to do about it. The first is, I do want you to think about the people in your family and those outside of it that God has used to give you your foundation of faith. And I just want you to thank God for them. I just want you to thank God for them. And I want you to contact them this week. And then secondly, I want to encourage you to think about, would anybody put me on their list? And that's not to make any of you feel guilty at all, as much as to say this, that your life and your legacy matters. Like, it matters so much. And you all, I know so many of you in this room, and you guys are flipping awesome. Like, incredible people. And golly nits, that's a West Virginia word. You should impact, like you have it. You have it. Like, I impact me. Like, you're that, not just important, but you have that. Like, who are the people that you're called to impact in your life?